Canada's F-35 kill switch, the ultimate betrayal. We're cancelling our F-35 order because we're worried America might turn off our planes. Imagine Canada's defense minister actually saying those words to the Pentagon. While the diplomatic language is more subtle, that's essentially the shocking decision Ottawa is now considering. Walking away from the world's most advanced fighter jet because they don't trust their closest ally anymore. You almost have to admire the irony. After decades of Americans complaining that Canada doesn't spend enough on defense, Canada finally commits $19 billion to fighter jets, only to have America elect a president who threatens economic warfare against them. It's like finally agreeing to buy your friend's car right as they threaten to slash your tires. No wonder Canada is now looking to European alternatives that don't come with an American remote control. The broken promise, how Canada's F-35 deal fell apart. What if I told you that Canada has been trying to buy these fighter jets for over a decade, only to walk away at the last minute? The saga of Canada's F-35 procurement is nothing short of a political thriller with more twists and turns than a mountain road. This complicated relationship began way back in 1997 when Canada signed on as a partner in the Joint Strike Fighter program. This wasn't a commitment to buy the planes, at least not yet, but it did give Canadian companies a seat at the table, allowing them to bid on contracts related to the F-35's development. It was a foot in the door that would later become increasingly difficult to extract. By 2006, Canada deepened its involvement by signing the Production, Sustainment and Follow-on Development Phase Memorandum of Understanding. This impressive mouthful of bureaucratic language essentially formalized Canada's participation alongside allies like the United States, the United Kingdom and Australia. Canadian aerospace companies were already becoming entangled in the massive supply chain that would eventually produce these cutting-edge fighters. Then came 2010, when Prime Minister Stephen Harper made the bold move of committing to purchase 65 F-35As at a price tag of $8.6 billion. No competitive bidding process, no alternatives considered, just a straightforward declaration that Canada would join the F-35 club. The decision sparked immediate controversy, but Harper stood firm, insisting this was the right aircraft for Canada's defense needs. Enter Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. During the 2015 election campaign, they hammered the Conservatives on the F-35 decision, promising voters they would cancel the purchase and find a cheaper, more suitable alternative. It became a central promise of their platform, a clear line in the sand between the two parties' approaches to military procurement and spending. When Trudeau took office, he made good on his promise, sort of. The new government didn't exactly cancel the F-35 program outright, but they did restart the entire fighter jet selection process, forcing the F-35 to compete against alternatives. For years, the procurement process dragged on, while Canada's aging CF-18 fleet continued to deteriorate, requiring expensive life extension programs just to keep them airworthy. Then, in a plot twist worthy of a political drama, the Trudeau government did a complete 180-degree turn in 2022. After years of criticizing the F-35, they announced their intention to purchase 88 of them, even more than Harper had planned, at a significantly higher cost of $19 billion. The first deliveries were scheduled for 2026, with a full squadron operational by 2029 and the entire fleet expected by the mid-2030s. The announcement was met with a mixture of relief and skepticism. Relief that Canada had finally made a decision after years of dithering, and skepticism about whether this was truly the right aircraft for Canada's needs. Defense officials stood proudly alongside Lockheed Martin executives, touting the economic benefits and security advantages the F-35 would bring. And those economic benefits were substantial. Canadian companies had already secured approximately $2.8 billion in contracts related to the F-35, with projections suggesting they could secure up to $10.6 billion more over the next few decades. More than 110 Canadian firms had their hands in the F-35 supply chain, producing everything from landing gear components to major structural elements. Take Magellan Aerospace, for example, which builds horizontal tail assemblies for the F-35A variant, contracts valued at around $1.5 billion, or Avcorp Industries, which serves as the sole source supplier for the outboard wing assembly on the F-35C. These and dozens of other companies have staked their business models on Canada's continued participation in the F-35 program, potentially supporting thousands of high-skilled aerospace jobs across the country. But behind the smiling press conferences and optimistic projections, concerns were brewing. The geopolitical landscape was shifting. Relations with the United States, Canada's closest ally and the primary developer of the F-35, were becoming increasingly unpredictable. Questions about sovereignty, technological dependence and strategic autonomy were being raised in quiet government offices across Ottawa. And then, the bombshell. Recent statements from Defence Minister Bill Blair indicate that the government is now actively exploring alternatives to the F-35 once again. Blair revealed that Prime Minister Trudeau has specifically instructed him to examine those things and have discussions with other sources, particularly where there may be opportunities to assemble those fighter jets in Canada. This suggests a potential pivot toward European suppliers who might be willing to establish production facilities on Canadian soil. The Aerospace Industries Association of Canada immediately sounded the alarm, warning that cancelling the F-35 purchase would put thousands of Canadian jobs at risk. Government projections had suggested the F-35 program would contribute approximately $425 million to GDP annually and support roughly 3,300 jobs per year over a 25-year period. Walking away now would not only disrupt this economic activity, but potentially lock Canadian suppliers out of future international contracts. Quick pause. What's your take on Canada's potential move away from the F-35? Should Canada prioritise sovereignty or stick with its traditional defence partnerships? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I look forward to seeing your views. If you're finding value in this analysis, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us keep delivering detailed coverage of the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching. Let's continue. While billions in economic benefits might be at stake in the F-35 deal, there's something far more disturbing lurking beneath the surface. Canadian defence officials are wrestling with a chilling reality. Every F-35 fighter jet contains technology that essentially puts Canada's air defence at the mercy of American control. This isn't science fiction. It's the cold reality of modern military technology that has Canada's top brass questioning whether these stealth fighters represent security or submission. The F-35 isn't just an aircraft, it's a flying computer that depends entirely on its software to function. Unlike fighter jets of previous generations that could operate independently, the F-35 requires constant software updates and maintenance protocols that flow through systems completely controlled by the United States. Without these updates, these $100 million machines become little more than museum pieces. At the heart of this dependency is the F-35's notorious Autonomic Logistics Information System, or ALIS. Think of ALIS as the brain and nervous system of the entire F-35 fleet. This system doesn't just track maintenance needs, it's the gateway for mission planning, threat analysis, weapons deployment, and virtually every operational aspect of the aircraft. And here's the kicker, all of this data routes through American-controlled servers that Canada has no sovereignty over. When Canadian pilots prepare for a mission, they must first connect to ALIS to download their flight plans, receive targeting data, and configure their aircraft. After landing, The F-35 automatically uploads performance data back to centralized American servers. If these connections are severed, whether through technical issues or deliberate American action, the capabilities of Canada's Air Force could be severely compromised overnight. What makes this situation particularly troubling is how the United States maintains ironclad control over critical components. The F-35's source code remains strictly off-limits to purchasing nations. Canada would have no ability to modify, update, or even fully inspect the software running their own fighter jets. When critical parts need replacement, they must come through American-approved channels with American permission. This system of control extends beyond normal operational concerns. The US can technically prevent any nation's F-35 fleet from receiving critical updates, essentially degrading their capabilities over time. In extreme scenarios, they could potentially send updates that restrict certain functions or operational parameters, limiting where and how Canada could deploy its own aircraft. A senior Canadian defence official, speaking on condition of anonymity, recently expressed these concerns bluntly. "We're not just buying aircraft, we're buying into a permanent technological relationship where we will never have full control over our own assets." That presents some uncomfortable strategic questions. These aren't paranoid delusions. The F-35 program has already demonstrated this power dynamic in practice. When Turkey decided to purchase Russian S-400 missile defense systems against American wishes, the Pentagon swiftly removed Turkey from the F-35 program entirely, cancelling deliveries and blocking Turkish companies from the supply chain. The message was crystal clear: defy American interests, lose access to the technology. Canadian military strategists are now asking unsettling questions. What happens if Canadian foreign policy objectives diverge significantly from American interests? What if Canada needs to deploy these aircraft in a conflict where the US prefers to remain neutral? The technological dependency creates leverage that extends far beyond the initial purchase price. Particularly alarming for Canadian officials is the timing of these realizations, with projections showing a potential return of Trump-style America First policies. The prospect of entrusting Canada's air defense to technology that remains under complete American control seems increasingly risky. Trump's demonstrated willingness to leverage every available tool against allies who don't meet his expectations has defense planners on edge. The official name for this mechanism isn't a kill switch. The Pentagon vehemently denies such a thing exists. But in practical terms, the combination of proprietary software, centralized update systems, and controlled supply chains creates something functionally equivalent. A former RCF commander put it this way: "They don't need a literal button to disable our jets. They just need to withhold the next software update or deny access to replacement parts." This technological dependency becomes even more concerning when you consider the geography and defense relationship between the countries. Canada's vast Arctic territories represent a crucial defense frontier, but the ability to patrol and protect this territory would be contingent on continued American software cooperation, a situation that makes many Canadian sovereignty experts deeply uncomfortable. For a country already anxious about maintaining its independence alongside its powerful neighbor, the F-35's hidden strings represent a defense vulnerability that goes far beyond the aircraft's capabilities or price tag. It's about who ultimately controls Canada's ability to defend itself. The ultimate vulnerability in Canada's F-35 deal isn't just the technological dependency, it's the shocking reality that a single presidential decision can transform your closest ally into a declared threat overnight. In 2018, when President Trump invoked national security concerns to justify tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, he didn't just disrupt trade relations, he fundamentally fractured the trust that underpinned decades of military cooperation. This wasn't a minor diplomatic spat. It was a seismic shift that still reverberates through Canada's defence planning circles today. Let's be clear about how extraordinary this moment was. Imagine waking up to discover your oldest friend, someone who shares the world's longest undefended border with you and has fought alongside you in multiple wars, has officially designated you as a risk to their security. The 25% tariff on steel and 10% on aluminum wasn't just about economics, it was the justification that sent shockwaves through Ottawa. Using Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act to classify Canadian exports as dangerous to American security was unprecedented. Canadian officials weren't just surprised, they were stunned. This wasn't how allies treated each other. The immediate imposition of retaliatory tariffs by Canada showed just how serious this breach of trust had become. But the damage went far beyond trade relations. How could Canada continue to entrust its air defense to a partner that could flip from ally to adversary based on a presidential whim? The tariff shock came amid a barrage of personal attacks against Prime Minister Trudeau that further deteriorated the relationship. After a contentious G7 summit, Trump unleashed a series of extraordinary accusations, calling Trudeau weak and dishonest, unheard-of language between leaders of these historically aligned nations. The calculated public undermining of Canada's leadership sent a clear message that personal loyalty to Trump trumped decades of institutional alliance. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or diplomatic niceties. As Trump repeatedly questioned America's commitment to NATO and made veiled threats about withdrawing support from European allies, Canadian defense planners had to face an uncomfortable question. What happens if America decides Canada isn't worth defending? The entire North American defense infrastructure was built on the assumption that Canadian and American security interests were inseparable. Trump's America First doctrine shattered that foundation. The real-world consequences of Trump's unpredictability became evident with his sudden withdrawal of support from Kurdish allies in Syria. Partners who had fought alongside American forces against ISIS abandoned virtually overnight. Canadian military planners couldn't help but wonder if the US could discard battlefield allies so easily. What guarantee did Canada have that its defense needs would remain a priority? Even more alarming was Trump's abrupt pause on military aid to Ukraine, holding back congressionally approved funding while seeking political favors. This weaponization of military support for personal gain raised serious questions about the reliability of American commitments. For Canadian defense officials already worried about the F-35's software dependency, these actions transformed theoretical concerns into concrete fears. When you consider that Canada would need to connect to American servers for everything from mission planning to targeting data, the implications become starkly clear. Would a future president hold these critical updates hostage during the next trade dispute? The very electronic infrastructure that makes the F-35 so powerful also creates an unprecedented vulnerability for Canada's sovereignty. The 2018 National Security Threat Designation wasn't just a temporary irritant, it permanently altered Canada's strategic calculus. How can you fully trust a partner with control over your advanced fighter jets when that same partner has proven willing to weaponize national security language against you? The answer for many Canadian officials is that you simply can't. This trust deficit explains why Canada is now exploring European alternatives like the Swedish Gripen. It's not just about finding a cheaper aircraft or creating domestic jobs. It's about ensuring that Canada's ability to defend itself isn't subject to the changing moods of American politics. As one defense analyst put it, independence in defense capability has suddenly become much more valuable to Canada than interoperability with an unpredictable partner. With Trump potentially returning to power, these concerns have taken on new urgency. The question haunting Canadian defence planners isn't whether the F-35 is technically superior, it's whether Canada can afford to place its air defence capabilities in the hands of a nation that has already shown its willingness to view Canada as a security threat when politically convenient. With American reliability in question, Canada's military planners have turned their gaze across the Atlantic to a fighter jet that could rewrite the rules of their defense strategy. The Saab Gripen doesn't just represent an alternative aircraft, it represents a fundamental shift in who controls Canada's skies. While stealth technology and advanced sensors dominate headlines, the true revolution of the Gripen lies in what it offers beyond the airframe itself, genuine sovereignty. The Swedish-built Gripen E comes purpose-built for the exact environment Canadian pilots face daily. Unlike many fighter jets designed for desert warfare or carrier operations, the Gripen was conceived from its first blueprint to operate in the harsh Arctic conditions that dominate Canada's northern territories. This isn't merely a marketing claim, it's engineered into the aircraft's DNA. The Gripen can take off and land on improvised runways as short as 800 meters, even on ordinary highways and roads covered in snow and ice, a capability the F-35 simply cannot match. For a nation with vast, sparsely populated Arctic regions, this operational flexibility represents a quantum leap in defensive capability. Canadian sovereignty no longer hinges on maintaining expensive, vulnerable, conventional airfields that could be targeted in a conflict. Instead, the Gripen allows for distributed operations across Canada's enormous territory, creating a defense network that's nearly impossible to neutralize with a single strike. The financial math tells an equally compelling story. While the Gripen E's acquisition cost sits in roughly the same ballpark as the F-35A, the long-term economics reveal the true disparity. According to US Air Force data, the F-35 costs approximately $33,000 per flight hour to operate. The Gripen? Just $8,000. Over a typical 30-year service life, this fourfold difference translates into billions of dollars saved. Money that could fund other defense priorities or simply reduce the burden on Canadian taxpayers. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Saab's offer isn't the aircraft itself, but what comes with it. In an unprecedented move that directly challenges America's tight control over its defense technology, Sweden has placed something extraordinary on the table: complete technological sovereignty. Saab has offered Canada a 100% technology transfer, the keys to the kingdom. We can easily accommodate an in-country production line if that is a priority, Saab representatives stated, mirroring their successful partnership with Brazil, where initial jets were built in Sweden, but the majority assembled locally by Brazilian industry. This isn't just about buying fighter jets, it's about building them on Canadian soil with Canadian workers under Canadian control. The implications for Canada's aerospace industry are transformative. Establishing final assembly lines for these advanced fighters would require a substantial workforce of engineers, technicians, and support staff. Saab has explicitly pledged to generate long-lasting, high-tech employment opportunities and business opportunities across all regions of Canada through its industrial program. This proposition stands in stark contrast to the F-35 arrangement, where Canada receives some subcontracting work but remains dependent on American approval for the most critical aspects of its defense capabilities. With the Gripen, Canadian engineers would have complete access to the aircraft systems, including the ability to modify, upgrade, and maintain the fleet independently. The Gripen E itself is no technological slouch. With a top speed of Mach 2 and a range of 3,200 kilometers without refueling, it comes armed with the formidable Meteor Beyond Visual Range air-to-air missile, giving Canadian pilots a decisive edge in long-range engagements. Its advanced ES-5 Raven ESA radar provides exceptional situational awareness, while sophisticated electronic warfare systems ensure survivability in contested environments. Countries including Sweden, Brazil, South Africa and the Czech Republic have already embraced the Gripen platform, creating a multinational support network that doesn't depend on American approval. This global ecosystem offers Canada partnership opportunities with nations that share similar strategic concerns but don't come with the baggage of American foreign policy priorities. The revelation that makes this offer truly revolutionary is how it addresses Canada's deepest concern about the F-35, the hidden kill switch. With the Gripen, Canada would control its own software updates, maintenance schedules, and operational parameters. No foreign nation could remotely disable Canada's air defense capabilities or hold them hostage to political demands. In an era of increasing uncertainty in international relations, this independence represents something that no amount of stealth technology can match. Sweden's offer creates an opportunity for Canada to establish a new center of gravity for its defense industry, one that wouldn't be subject to the whims of American politics. The industrial benefits would cascade throughout Canada's economy, with high-skilled jobs in engineering, software development, manufacturing and maintenance, spread across multiple provinces. Behind Sweden's dazzling industrial promises lurks a crippling crisis that threatens to ground Canada's entire fighter jet program before it even takes flight. The harsh reality that military planners are reluctant to discuss publicly is that the Royal Canadian Air Force simply doesn't have enough qualified personnel to operate the aircraft they already possess. This isn't just a minor staffing issue, it's an existential threat to Canada's air defense capabilities that makes introducing a second fighter jet type virtually impossible. The RCAF is hemorrhaging talent at an alarming rate. The shortage extends far beyond pilots to include specialist mechanics, flight instructors and ground crew. These aren't positions you can fill with a quick recruitment drive or by offering signing bonuses. Training a fighter pilot requires years of intensive instruction, and developing the expertise to maintain advanced aircraft systems demands specialized knowledge that can't be rushed or improvised. This personnel emergency explains why military commanders break into a cold sweat at the mere suggestion of operating both F-35s and Gripens simultaneously. Running a mixed fleet would require the RCAF to establish completely separate training programs for each aircraft type. Pilots qualified on one platform would need extensive retraining to operate the other. Every technician would need dual certification. Flight instructors would require mastery of both systems. The logistical nightmare doesn't end there. Each aircraft would demand its own distinct maintenance protocols, specialized tools and diagnostic equipment. The supply chains would have zero overlap, forcing the RCAF to maintain parallel inventories of thousands of spare parts. Even the hangars and maintenance facilities would need to be duplicated in many cases, as the technical requirements for servicing stealth aircraft differ dramatically from conventional fighters. This duplication creates a mathematical impossibility for the RCAF's strained human resources. When you divide an already insufficient pool of qualified personnel across two aircraft types, you don't just double the workload, you potentially halve the operational readiness of both fleets. Military planners have calculated that maintaining two distinct fighter types would require nearly 40% more personnel than operating a single fleet. Personnel that Canada simply doesn't have and cannot realistically train in the required time frame. The financial implications are equally devastating. Conservative estimates suggest operating dual fleets would increase annual operating expenses by at least 30%. These aren't one-time costs, but recurring annual expenses that would ripple through the defense budget for decades. Every dollar spent maintaining duplicate systems is a dollar diverted from other critical defense priorities, potentially undermining Canada's entire military posture. Interoperability concerns compound these challenges. The F-35 was specifically designed to integrate seamlessly with NORAD and NATO systems, creating a unified defense network across North America. Introducing a non-US fighter would potentially create communication and coordination gaps during joint operations. During moments of crisis, These gaps could prove catastrophic, undermining the very purpose of having advanced fighters in the first place. The risks extend beyond technical compatibility issues. The F-35's advanced sensor fusion systems allow it to share critical battlefield information with American forces in real time. Alternative fighters would likely have limited access to this integrated data environment, potentially leaving Canadian pilots with an incomplete picture during joint operations. In a high-stakes confrontation with Russian or Chinese forces over the Arctic, this information disparity could prove deadly. Even European alternatives would create their own webs of dependency. The Gripen, for instance, is powered by an American-made General Electric engine, creating potential vulnerabilities in its supply chain. Sweden's military-industrial complex may be impressive for a nation of its size, but it lacks the scale and global reach of American defense contractors, raising questions about long-term sustainability and support. The stark choice facing Canada isn't just about which fighter to buy. It's about the fundamental direction of Canada's defense strategy for the next half-century. Continuing with the F-35 means embracing deeper integration with American military systems, accepting both the security benefits and the potential loss of sovereignty that entails. Pivoting to a European alternative offers greater independence, but risks weakening Canada's role within NORAD and its ability to defend North American airspace alongside its primary ally. This is why defense analysts describe this as an all-or-nothing decision. The severe personnel limitations facing the RCAF make operating a mixed fleet impossibly expensive and logistically unfeasible. Canada must choose a single path forward and commit to it fully, as any attempt to hedge bets by maintaining both American and European fighters would likely result in two ineffective air forces rather than one cohesive fighting force. What we're witnessing here isn't just Canada reconsidering a fighter jet purchase. It's a fundamental realignment of the Western security architecture that has stood since World War II. As Canada explores European alternatives, we're seeing the potential for deeper integration with defense industries in countries like Sweden and France, completely reshaping NATO's internal power dynamics. This pivot could dramatically alter Canada's approach to military procurement, prioritizing strategic autonomy over traditional alliances. The implications extend to NORAD itself, potentially challenging America's surveillance dominance over North American airspace. The ultimate question facing Canada isn't about aircraft. It's whether Western military cooperation can survive in a world where allies no longer implicitly trust each other. And that concludes today's detailed look at Canada's fighter jet dilemma. Thank you for joining us and staying informed about these critical defense developments. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications to keep up with future reports. Until next time, stay informed and stay vigilant.